So today I'm going to talk about diffusion, osmosis, and active transport. Three very important subjects in biology, or science in general. Um, but let's go with diffusion comes from the fact that molecules always move unless we are at a temperature of perfect zero. Um, in a solid, molecules will vibrate, but in a liquid or in air, molecules will move around. And we can see this if we have a container of water and we place a drop of dye here in one corner. Of course, it has to be a dye that is soluble to water. This oil will have. At beginning, we'll just have the color here, but because the water molecules move around, so does the molecules here. The molecules will start to spread out. And in general, we tend to see diffusion going from a place of a high concentration towards a low concentration. It's not that the molecules know where there's a high or low concentration, but just by random movement, we tend to see a move from a high concentration towards a low concentration. So if you wait long enough, the dye will have mixed with all the water there. Temperature, of course, affects this. At high temperature, the molecules move faster. So if this is warm water, we will expect this diffusion process to go faster than in cold water. So how does this work in biology? Again, I do apologize for this rather primitive setup, but this is what we have here. If we have a cell here, and here we have a capillary with blood running through. Inside the cell here, we have a mitochondria, and as you might remember, those mitochondria use oxygen to create energy. So here, we will have a low oxygen concentration because they are using the oxygen. Out here, I'll have my red blood cells running by, and here will be a very high concentration of oxygen. So we'll see here is that there'll be a net movement by diffusion of oxygen from the high concentration, the red blood cells, and into the cells, into mitochondria, into low concentration. So a lot of the movement we see in the body or the cells, if it goes from a high concentration to low concentration, it's diffusion. The shorter the distance, the faster diffusion will of course go. If the mitochondria is down here, it'll take a lot longer. And in general, diffusion works best over short distances. That is why very small animals, they can take up oxygen just from the air, while bigger animals need a respiratory system. So the second concept we have to talk about today is osmosis. Osmosis is diffusion with a twist. So here I have drawn an example of how you can see it. Of course, this is not how it looks, but it's just a model. If we have a membrane that will allow small molecules to move freely through it, that could be like a cell wall or a plasma membrane, but the holes are too small for big molecules to move through it, then we'll have osmosis. So the red dots here represent water, while the big blue ones here could be huge proteins, for example. In this case here, we can see that there are more protein on this side than this side. So we'll have a diffusion gradient going from here to here. So if we just remove the membrane by diffusion, some of the protein will end up over here. But because the membrane holes are too small to allow it, although they kind of want, it's a wrong word, but you know what I mean, they want to go here, they can't. But we also have a diffusion gradient of water because there's more water molecule here than here. So what we'll tend to see then is we'll see a net movement of water molecules this way. Of course, some water molecules in here will also move the other way just by random, but in general, we'll see a bigger movement of water from here to here. So water will move from here to here. We say water moves from a high water potential to a low water potential. And this is important, for example, in the root of plants. If you have a cell membrane and you have a lot of, for example, sugar molecules in here, that can be used to draw water from the soil into the root here. That's osmosis. The last thing we need to look at is active transport. Again, here we have a cell membrane, and here on one side, that would be the outside, we have a lot of this molecule here, and on the inside we have fewer. This could be something that the cell requires to keep its electric potential as a nerve cell. It could be many things. In this case here, by simple diffusion, we will expect that eventually we have a net movement this way. But if the cell wants to have a difference between this side and this side, it can use energy to actively transport molecules in or out. So in this case here, diffusion would not normally allow a net movement this way because there's more on this side than this side. But if we use energy in the form ATP, a protein here, a transport protein can grab it, it now grabs our molecule, and by using the energy, it changes shape and pushes on the outside. So this actually means that there are, like the sodium potassium pump, other pumps in the cell, which actually all the time use energy to create an active transport over your cell membrane. So the difference between active transport and osmosis and diffusion is active transport. You actually move from the low concentration towards the high, but you do it by using energy in the form of ATP. So a short recap. Diffusion, net diffusion goes from a high concentration towards a low concentration and is of course affected by temperature. Osmosis goes from a high concentration or high water potential to low water potential for the small molecules who can move over the semipermeable membrane. Active transport goes from low to high concentration by use of active transport. Neither diffusion or osmosis uses energy, but active transport uses ATP to make the transport protein move and change shape. Diffusion can be seen as a random movement of molecules in liquid or gas. Osmosis here in biology is a random movement of small molecules in a liquid over a semi-permeable membrane that blocks the movement or hinders the movement of the larger molecules. And active transport can be seen as selective transport over a membrane by transport proteins. Diffusion, one of its role in biology is moving oxygen into the cell. Osmosis, one of the role is the movement of water into root hair, and one of the many roles for active transport is active transport of glucoses over the intestinal membranes. So there's much more to it, but this is just a quick recap.